And secondly, in a wire cage, a certain percentage of your baits will get their head stuck in the cage, where in the plastic there's not as many holes, less problem with that. But the biggest thing with the rotocast type plant or cage is the fact that there's nowhere near as much current. It makes it much easier from the side. Jimmy, you had a question too?
Yeah, with Greg going in towards North Bay Village, in the bay in there, if he's fishing a tournament, will the gods survive there for a couple days?
Jim's question is, what if I'm a good ways from the inlet? He's talking about a buddy of his that's 5 miles from an inlet. Generally speaking, in the wintertime, in a dry time period where we're not getting any rain, bait will live, depending on a little bit on the location, but bait will live 3 or 4 miles and even 5 miles from an inlet. But if we're getting a lot of rain, then the salinity gets too low for goggle eyes. Blue runners are a little hardier. Pinfish don't care. And herring do okay, but pilchards won't do well if the salinity gets low. So the closer you are to the inlet, the better you are, but especially in the wintertime, you can store bait anywhere. And by the way, when all is said and done, if you want to make sure you always have a little bit of live bait, and you want something that's tougher than nails, then the first time it's blowing too hard to go out and go fishing, you go down the intercoastal waterway to inside Baker's Haulover Inlet, and you go on the grass flats west of the intercoastal waterway, and you fill your live well with 100 or 120 pinfish. And as long as you got a little bit of salt in the water, pinfish can be stored for months. And if you forget to feed them, they'll become cannibals and feed themselves. And don't ever underestimate the value of a pinfish as a live bait, because a pinfish we think of as being on the grass flats in the bay, but the fact of the matter is that pinfish spend the summer between Daytona Beach and North Carolina and come down to visit us for the winter just like all the rest of the snowbirds. And they actually migrate a great percentage of the time out in 200, 250 feet of water. I've on numerous occasions seen acres of them tailing south in December. And when they used to have fish traps on the Atlantic side of Florida, the fish trappers would go out and pull traps in late November and early December, and there'd be so many pinfish in the trap that there wasn't room for another fish, and they were catching them out on the bottom in 200, 250 feet of water. So everything that we like to catch knows about pinfish, and at one time or another, everybody eats them. And I have good news for you. Whether it's a snook, a grouper, an amberjack, a yellowjack, a sailfish, or yellowfin tuna, I have yet to catch one with a pair of scissors, and I've caught all of those fish and plenty others on pinfish. So you don't have to worry about the fins. They have a way around them, which is a good news for us too, because it means they don't feel our fish hooks so much. Other baits that are very commonly used, that even in Port Everglades are easy to get, and they're not on the chart up here, but this is a Speedo, also called a fire tail in Palm Beach. It's actually a frigate bonita. When it was alive, it had a bright orange tail, has a very small mouth, pretty big eye. If I am fishing a kingfish tournament, my first bait of choice to catch kingfish is a Speedo. If somebody said that I was going to have to live bait for wahoo, my bait of choice would be a Speedo. And my second choice would be a paper towel to wipe up the mess that I make up here, Springer. Speedos are one of the easiest baits to acquire out of any inlet. We're not going to live bait with them.
No, well, you're talking kingfish tournaments.
No, we're talking about Speedo, live bait though. Thank you though, Springer. Springer loves ribbon fish.
I love my ribbon.
But they're a dead bait, and we're doing a live bait program, and you wouldn't want to try to use live ribbon fish because you can't catch them around here thick enough. But to giving Springer his due, 10 days ago or so, we caught a ribbon fish while we were tarpon fishing. And 2 days later, we were going sword fishing in the daytime, so we rigged up our ribbon fish, and we caught a 225-pounder on it. So ribbon fish are a great bait, but we're doing a live bait program, Billy. But anyway, this is a Speedo. If you go out of Palm Beach Inlet, and I still need the paper towel. If you go out of Palm Beach Inlet, and you go to the sea buoy and you put a chum bag overboard and you fish with a number 8 hook sabiki rig, same sabiki rig but with a number 8 hook, and hold it dead still next to your chum bag, you should be able to catch all the speedos or firetails you want. If you go out of Hillsborough Inlet and you go to the sea buoy and put a chum bag in the water, and by the way, when you buy a chum bag for catching live bait, always get the chum bags with the small holes. You don't have to rush to chum with live bait, and you don't need big chunks, so the small holes are a better deal for you. But if you went to the sea buoy at Hillsborough Inlet, there's a good chance you'll catch speedos and some blue runners. If you go to the Miami Sea buoy, most of the time you'll catch speedos. If you know where there's a wreck in 100, 150 feet of water, even into 70 or 80 feet of water, get uptight of those and chum, you'll catch speedos. And everything will eat them. The only downside to a speedo is their life expectancy on a kite is only about 20 minutes. So if you're using them on the kite, you have to get fish on them pretty quick, or you have to slow troll the kite so you can keep them swimming. But very, very effective bait, very easy to handle. While we're on the topic of going to buoys to catch bait, this guy with the stripes on his back who has a big mouth is a tinker mackerel. And they can be caught the same way in the same places, but only in the wintertime. Speedos are around year-round. And tinker mackerel are hardier than the speedos and probably just a tad bit better bait. And you'll find them around all the buoys in the wintertime. Now, we don't find them on the wrecks as much on the surface, but if you take a goggle eye sabiki rig, the D115 or D112, whichever one you have, and you drop down to the bottom around your different wrecks in around 100 to 200 feet of water, you'll frequently catch tinker mackerel in those locations. In the daytime, by the way, is when both of these bait fish are caught for the most part. And then another bait fish found around markers and on wrecks is cigar minnows. And if you look on our chart, it's called a round scad right here in the middle. And they're the one fish that throws my whole game plan out of sync. Cigar minnows like sabiki rigs with red heads instead of my sabiki rigs that have green heads. So if you're going to go cigar minnow fishing, you have to have some number 4 hooks with red heads instead of green heads to be consistent with them. So those are the main baits we're going to acquire and where we catch them. And if you have any questions about them, now's a good time. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Do you usually anchor or drift, like going past a marker or a wreck?
The gentleman asked whether we anchor or drift when we go by a marker. When we're going by a marker that's in 120 feet of water, something like that, whenever possible, I have an outboard, and we hold the boat in reverse on the upstream side of the marker, and then the anglers are fishing down the side of the boat. If the current's real strong, you have to fish off the stern. But when you're doing that, you really have to be just about directly upstream of the marker. So the guy driving the boat has one job, and only one job. Don't hit the marker. Now, if you're by yourself or there's just you and your kids or something like that, you drive up to the marker. You see that the water's running to the north, so you point your boat south and just a slight bit to the east, and you put your chum bag in the water. And you want to make progress getting away from the marker, but you do it at a relatively low speed until you get 100 feet from the marker or so. Then you can take the boat out of gear. And if you drift by the marker, most of the time the bait will stay with you until you get a little bit past the marker, and then they'll run back to the marker. And most of the time then you can drift by.